Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Daniel Umstead, host of the RNG radio show. I got another amazing guest on here, but you know what I got to do first? I got to run through the bio. So he brings over 30 years of trusted advisory experience to learning leaders and corporate executives across diverse private and public sectors, specializing in the science of learning and training. His focus extends beyond what to train, emphasizing on how to effectively apply learned concepts. His training related expertise spans program management, systems engineering, innovation, creativity, and DEIA. He has crafted tailored experiential learning programs, spearheaded global training initiatives, and collaborated with scientists and engineers in developing cutting edge capabilities for the U.S. intelligence and Department of Defense post 9/11. A sought after speaker, he has delivered keynote seminars at prestigious engineering and leadership conferences. He holds a magna cum laude, BSA, and MS in social and organizational learning from George Mason University and pursued Ph.D. studies in human and organizational systems. He served on the advisory board of the American Society for Quality Learning Institute and holds esteemed designations as a U.S. Navy Master Training Specialist, Distinguished Instructor, and Master Transition Management Facilitator. He is also certified in Briggs, FIRIO-B, InsideOut Coaching, DISC, Blanchard's Situational Leadership, and is a certified diversity ambassador. And ladies and gentlemen, I have him on the show, Mr. Lonney Gregory. Lonney, how you doing today, brother?
Wow, I'm good. Yeah, I was trying to figure out who that guy was you were talking about.
Listen, man, I had to do some stalking to find this information. Just your incredible journey, man. Before we get started in this thing, because I got some questions. What got you on this pathway, man? Learning and development is not something that they teach in school. As far as that career pathway. But what got you interested in the mix of it all, man?
Yeah, I can tell you, man, and thanks so much for having me on the show, Daniel. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. Um, Honestly, I can tell you, I got to this business totally by accident. And when I mean by accident, I really, really mean by accident. So forever ago, I was in the United States Navy. I was an electronics technician, and I was working on a piece of equipment in the electronics bay. Now, quiet as it was kept back then, I was really breaking a couple of the safety rules, right? Not following all the
Hey,
rules.
Myers are closed.
Okay. And I took a shock, 17,000 volts. They estimated 3 amps.
Oh,
It nearly killed me. Actually, it did, in fact, kill me. I was resuscitated on site, spent a couple of days in the hospital, came back to work, and met with the commanding officer. And he says to me, he says, Petty Officer Gregory, if you had expired, we would have named the electronics bay after you, the Lonney F. Gregory Memorial Electronics Bay, right? So we kind of laughed and
so
joked
low.
about that a little bit. And then he said, I'm not comfortable sending you back to work in the electronics bay. Why don't you just go hang out with the training petty officer for a couple of weeks? And Daniel, I've been hanging out with the training guys ever since that accident. Um, and it was the thing that changed the trajectory of my life. And what I figured out, or what I gained an appreciation for, were all the things that people do to prepare people like me, right, to go and do their jobs. So, as an electronics technician in the Navy, you got to go through a series of schools, in order to get your work permit, so to speak, so that you know how to be assigned, what ship to go to, what you're going to be working on. And I went through dozens and dozens of schools as an electronic technician, but it wasn't until I stopped working in a field and then had to go hang out like with the training people where it really hit me that this is a dedicated and disciplined profession to create the training environment, the petri dish, if you will, of how to come together, how to work on something, and how to support mission and vision. And I've been hooked ever since, my brother. Ever since.
That's awesome. So shocked, if you will, into a new career pathway. So interesting, interesting. Um, Now, as far as Because there's a lot of topics with this, learning and development, especially with the career pathways you come across. I know that I mentioned in the bio, you're working with engineers and scientists. What is like your top three passionate topics that you like to discuss when you are doing learning and development?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Certainly early in my career, you pretty much teach what you are asked to teach, told to teach. Some things are required that you do. Right now, my personal professional focus are on two ideas. The first idea is around bias. Like, ooh, bias, that four-letter word. Yeah, people respond and react to bias like it is one of those other four-letter words. But bias is not that type of four-letter word. Um, and what I like to tell people, bias is a brain function, not a malfunction. And because we really don't have an understanding and appreciation for what bias is, what bias does as a brain function in support of our abilities to just live and conduct our lives, we have this wrong idea and interpretation of what bias does to and for us. So I'm on a mission to normalize this ideal of bias and to get people to just understand it for what it is, literally a biological brain function and not an indication of the extent or the degree to which you are critical or not liking someone just because of something else. Now, there is a relationship between bias and, discrimination and those types of things. But that relationship is based not on bias, the function, but it's how we apply our biases to our living lives. And that's where things like discrimination come up. So I'd just like to share that message, normalize this ideal about bias, get people engaged and involved in understanding what bias does as a brain function and how it contributes to decision making. I'm hoping maybe we'll make better decisions, Daniel.
Yeah.
The second thing that I'm interested in is with respect to DEIA. Now, we know those are each acronyms. They stand for something in particular. D for diversity. I'm going to switch up the order on y'all. I for inclusion, E for equity, A for accessibility. Now, you notice the order that I announced it, DIEA, is different from how we typically refer to it as DEIA. I was always very curious, like why are we doing that? I suppose, Dan, it's because we can't say die as an acronym, right? D,
Right.
you can't go
Teaching y'all
around
about
saying
die today. Y'all get your pen and
exactly
paper out like,
right.
wait, what? What's going on?
Yeah, we can't do that. However, that simple transposition, moving the I and the E, actually changes the opportunity to have a fuller discussion because there is a relationship in the order in which we discover these concepts. So many of us have been around long enough to know that D came first, right? That stayed first. But then I entered the conversation, diversity and inclusion. In fact, when I entered this space, that's what it was. Diversity and inclusion. We hadn't even got to the equity part yet. There is a relationship between the evolution of these terms and now what they mean to each other. That evolution is quite evident in the E part, in the equity part. And the thing that I want people to understand, that I've come to understand, frankly, I'm just trying to share a little something, is that equity in and of itself is paradoxical. Equity is a concept that sounds good on the outside, but when you really examine it's full of paradox and irony because there is nothing equal about equity while they're based on the same types of concepts. And people use those two terms interchangeably, which gets us into trouble as we're starting to program events and activities, policies, procedures in this DEI space in support of equitable practices that often show up a little flat. It's because we're not recognizing the paradox that is inherent in this conversation, and particularly within equity. So I've created a program called the Equity Paradox to walk people through what is paradoxical about the ideal of equity, walk them through the evolution of DEIA, the relationship between the D's, the E's, the I's, the A's, etc., and how that shows up in real life, so to speak, particularly at work, and for those that are making decisions based upon equitable practices. So these are the two things that where my mind is right now, that and my grandchildren, right? Uh, so normalizing bias and understanding the paradox of equity.
I love that. I love that. And then because you've been doing it for quite so long, where are you seeing learning and development, or I even should even say the DEIA space, in the next 5 to 10 years? And I only bring that up because there was a documentary on HBO called Persona as relates to the Myers-Briggs test, and
Yeah.
it was pretty much trying to put everybody in that equitable bubble, when they're answering certain questions. From your expertise, like where do you see this growing in development to this space?
That's a fascinating question. It's one that people in our space ask and answer just about every day. I just want to take you back a couple of years.
Yeah.
I was moderating a panel, a leadership panel at one of the engineering conference, the BEIA conference, Black Engineer of the Year award and competitive global STEM competitive conference. I was moderating a panel with senior leaders from across the defense industry. Presidents, vice presidents, folks in charge of a lot of things. And I asked them that question if we were ever going to move away from we were not having a conversation about diversity and inclusion. And the resounding answer was no, we will never move away from having that. There will always be an opportunity to talk about diversity, meaning variety of thing. There will always be an opportunity to talk about inclusion. How do I get someone in the act of supporting and participating in a grander endeavor? There will always be the opportunity to discuss equity, the distribution of support based upon need. And none of those three things have anything to do with my skin color, your skin color, or whether or not we got hair on our heads. It's just a fact of business life.
Yeah.
Variety, opportunity, and policy and procedure making. So there's always going to be that aspect of it. And then when we do look around at each other, we will always realize that we are kind of different, right? You got hair, I don't have hair, right? That type of thing. So we'll always have the opportunity to have this conversation. What I'm hoping is we will be better at having the conversation, having realized, recognized, and acknowledged certain truths about ourselves as human beings, and then find ways to maximize the potential we have when we come together to do things. From my perspective, just understanding this DEIA conversation is really about understanding self with relationship to what we come together to do. And if we maximize this understanding, we become better at what it is we've come together to do. And if some of those things include like helping others, right? Supporting people in need, not just attending to the needs of a business and having people perform better with respect to their business. So that's a big part of it. But if we can just perform better to each other, say hello on the street a little bit more often, help a neighbor out as you see that they need some support, then I think we'll always have that opportunity, and I'm always going to be willing to help out.
So awesome. And then speaking of helping out, Lonnie, you talked about the equity program. Where can folks get in contact with you if they want to learn more, or of course need your services?
Yeah, so like everybody else, I operate as virtually as possible, but I'm willing to show up anywhere. I have my website that's irizepc.com. iRIZE is with a Z, right? So that's IRIZEPC.com. Just come to my website. Certainly I'm on they have to tell me what these platforms are. I won't lie to you.
Listen, I'm still a TikTok newbie, however they want to put it, and there's always brand new stuff. I'm still trying to learn the threads on Instagram, which I still don't understand, to be
Right.
honest. So I'm with
That's the other one.
I'm with you.
I'm on Instagram at iRIZE PCLG. Right, so iRIZE PCLG for Lonney Gregory, on Facebook at iRIZE Performance Consulting, and on LinkedIn, right? Just Lonney Gregory on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I'm sure I'm missing something. They'll tell me about that later. But I'm kind of easy to find. Just you can also just Google me, Lonney Gregory. I'll show up in a search, probably some YouTube video I have out there or an interview I've done previously. So that's the best way to find me, or just send me a note. Uh, L Gregory at iRizePC.com. L Gregory at iRizePC.com. And iRize is IRIZ as in zebra, E.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Appreciate that, man. And ladies and gentlemen, I know you're probably scrambling for piece of paper and pen and everything like that. I will make sure the links are at the bottom of this video. The other question I wanted to ask you, though, because you've been doing training, is there anything else that you do outside of learning development and training?
Yeah, a great question. So actually, I'm really into mountain biking.
Okay.
Uh, that's a funny story too. So I'm a little bit older than some. So I go visit my doctor regularly. One trip to the doctor, he was like, "Dude, you need to get some exercise." I'm like, "Okay." So I remember I went to the gym, and I'm bored at the gym. I was watching TV one evening, and commercial about a bicycle. I'm like, when I was a kid, I used to ride bicycles all the time. All
I
right,
know. Trust me.
so I said, I'm gonna go get me a bicycle. So I went to Dick's Sporting Goods, and went and bought a hybrid bicycle. And I downloaded an app to
Oh,
figure out where to go ride.
okay.
So I took the directions from this app and ended up in a park here in Maryland, in the Patapsco Park System in Maryland. Really major park system, beautiful. And so I'm riding this hybrid bicycle on what I didn't know were mountain bike trails. And I'm having a blast. I'm like a teenager all over again out there. And one guy stopped me, kind of impressed and kind of like concerned, like, why are you out here on that bike? He
Right.
said, it's nice to see you out here, but why that bike? And I just explained to him what happened. He said, that's not the type of bike you need to be on these trails. So then I went on this discovery mission about, well, what type of bike do you need? I didn't realize that there was a mountain biking sport at the time. It just never occurred to me. But then I got into it, bought in, sold out. I travel across the country to go mountain biking, North Carolina, Park City, Utah, uh, up and down the East Coast. There's parks there in Pennsylvania, parks in New Jersey. I've been to most of them. I've ridden in Florida, right? So I just travel around the country and get on these mountain bike trails that my daughter tells me I have no business being on at my age. But that's the other thing that I like to
Thanks for
do.
the love, daughter.
She's concerned. She's just trying to make sure she get her inheritance, right?
You're staying away from electricity, so that's the main thing.
Exactly. But yeah, that's the other thing that I do. And also, I'm an avid reader. I have a passion for fic nonfiction, right? I'm ever since Tom Clancy passed away and stopped writing, I don't read nonfiction anymore. But I love to read, and I love to read things about physics and the cosmos. Um, I like to understand universal principles and ponder the ideas of creation and what that constitutes, and then marry that with the things that I believe, that I attest to, that I wonder about. So I do those types of things. So the training work and consulting work that I do on my bicycle, uh, reading and studying on things like cosmology and physics, and then bouncing grandchildren off my lap. that'll take care of a good week for me.
Oh, no, that's incredible and inspiring as well. You had talked about universal principles and laws. Is there anything lessons wise that you have learned like throughout your years that really sticks forward for you? Not even so much, I guess, from what you've gained from your training, but just personal lessons that you've learned.
Man, so many, right? Like if you think about it, your ability to get beyond day to day, a portion of that can be attributable to something that you've learned or some better decision that you're making on a daily basis. There are a couple of things that I've learned over the years that have served me well. Wish that I'd learned them sooner. First thing is, it's not about me,
Mm.
right? So whatever that it is typically not about me. It's about something else or someone else and the support that is required for that person. It's not about me. When I was early in my career and I was, working towards ascending this corporate ladder, which by the way, I was fairly good at, that ascent, that ascent was about me, right? Title, recognition, pay, the corner office, right? That type of thing.
Those
That
were
was strictly ego driven. When I took the ego out of it and it became about how I support others, it took a lot of pressure off of this trajectory just to ascend. And I could be a lot more pure in how I supported others and why I supported others. So that was my first major lesson. It's not about you, it's not about me. It's always about something else. The other lesson that I learned was this thing that I call you, well, what was told to me is you stand where you sit. I remember I had gotten promoted and I was meeting with one of the vice presidents of this company, and he was talking about my promotion and my new aperture, how I should see things. And he said to me, Lonney, you stand where you sit. And I remember not knowing what that meant.
like,
Like, but
am I getting up? Am I sitting down?
right? What does that mean? And it did take a little while. And what it meant was there is a perspective shift or an adoption. It's not even a shift, it's an additional way to view your environment, your circumstance, and your performance, how you need to think about performance. So, like as a manager or a senior manager, something like that, where I sat was amongst my team. And so when I stood up in support of my team, right? What they needed, what they had to have, how they were doing, removing obstacles out of their way, getting them the resources that they needed, et cetera, et cetera. So I sat with my team and I stood with my team. When I got promoted, though, and particularly at the corporate level, I stood amongst the entirety of the organization, not just my team. And so the things that I had to consider was about organizational performance and not just my team's performance, value to the stockholder, the shareholder, and not just value to my clients and my team. So where you sit in that area, when you stand up, it becomes very obvious what you're supposed to be focused on. So I did learn that lesson. I stand where I sit. So right now, I sit in a place of experience. I sit in a place of belief in certain things, and I'm convicted in that belief. So when I stand, that's what you hear coming from me. You're now hearing where the product of where I'm situated right now. So when I stand up, I'm speaking about those things because those are the things that are important to me. Excuse me. So those are the two biggest lessons that I've learned. Certainly, there are a lot of additional lessons. Some are very intentional. Like I've decided to be better, like really better at listening. So you can imagine a person like me. I work in the organizational development and training field. I've been teaching about active listening and those types of things for forever, right? Active listening, that's been around for a while. That's not a new thing. But you'd be surprised what you discover about yourself and the fact that you're not really listening. You think you're listening, but you're not really listening. And I figured this out a little while ago that maybe I'm not really listening, like listening beyond that thing that I teach. So a couple of years ago, I made that my personal mantra, just to listen. And I wrote it on my fridge, right? You know how you do, you write stuff on it, right? Just listen. And I would see that, all day long. And what that turned out to be was like listen to self, listen to others, listen to self, listen to others. Daniel, this concept about the story you tell yourself in your head. Like I always say, you ever practice an argument you haven't had yet?
Yes, all the time, all the time with some colleagues that I work with. So yeah, absolutely,
Exactly,
absolutely.
right. So we have this ability to create this drama in our heads, and that's what we listen to. We rehearse this dialogue that we're going to have, and we look for these opportunities to share. And the thing was interesting, until you get to that moment where you're having this real conversation based upon the idea that you made up in your mind, as you go along your day, you are listening to yourself rehearse this conversation, but that's not doing you any good. You got to listen to yourself telling yourself a story and then shut that story down.
Mhm.
So that's what I mean about listening. Right? There are degrees of listening. There's listening to others. Then there's really listening to yourself and asking yourself, almost in conversation, why am I feeling this way? Why am I having this response? How can I adjust to this situation based upon the fact that I'm having some type of response? So listening is really paying very careful attention to what you're telling yourself about a situation and then making better decisions about how to respond and how to react as opposed to doing automatically. And more importantly, as opposed to going down this path that you rehearsed in your head. Now, that doesn't suggest that you shouldn't be prepared for conversations that you need to have. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is don't tell yourself a story that you can't substantiate
Right,
in
right.
your head, right? Don't listen to that story. Tell yourself the story or put together the dialogue that supports your ability to get through or get past and get to that next level thing that you're trying to accomplish. That's the story you should be telling in your head. So those are the cool things that I've learned and trying to apply to my life and teach others, share with others.
No, I like that. And you had pointed out because we have these conversations and in our brain or thinking because of let's say, for those that are living the 9 to 5 corporate world, they get that email, either it be late night, early in the morning, and they're looking at it and it's like, oh, I know they're not addressing this. Or I know that they didn't take what I took out of context. And then, of course, later on during the day, you're going to be having this meeting with said individual or individuals, and you're preparing for it and saying, like, oh, well, I'm going to be bringing this about, or I'm going to be bringing that about. And to your point, it's like, well, what's the goal of the conversation? What is ultimately being taken from the conversation? And even more so, and I've done this for myself. I feel myself getting mature because I'm realizing it's like, wait, why am I reacting this way?
Yeah.
Why am I looking at it this way? And then come to find out, sometimes it's how people communicate written is completely different how they communicate verbally. And sometimes because we're so used to on this role of conversations, we're thinking to ourselves like, oh, they must be talking about this, or they must be
Right.
bringing it in this way. And we're taking it out of context and we're creating all this drama built up inside of us with our chest out. And it's like, oh, they're ready for me, I'm ready. And then we get to the conversation, said individual or individuals, and it's like, Oh, yeah, I was just following up. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh,
So,
man, right.
right. Didn't mean to. No, I appreciate that. One of my final questions here that I have for you: who has influenced you most in your personal life and professional career, and why?
Wow, man, there's so many people to thank, to be thankful for. I gotta tell you, my sister, my middle sister, so I've got two sisters, I'm the baby. My middle sister has been my chief advocate and supporter like all my life. She's always believed in me and things I could do, always pumped me up, built me up. And we're 6 years different. So she's really like a big sister. She used to let me hang out with her and her friends. When she went to college, I could go visit her at college. My sister's just one of the coolest people in supporting just my growth and in my belief in self. So thank you, Pam. I love you. She's just the greatest. Now my other sister Sandy is cool too, but Sandy's one of the militant sisters,
Oh,
right?
I
So
got a couple of
very
family members
cool,
like that.
back in the day. So just kudos to my sister for always supporting me. I had a mentor, Cheryl McNeil. She passed away a couple years ago. She's been my mentor for a long time. She's the one that got me to think about, like, okay, what do you really want to do? You so smart. By the way, Cheryl was an old country girl, right? North Carolina. So she had that little country sass to her. She didn't take no spunk and she talked plain and simple. Um, she said, okay, you so smart, what you gonna do with your life type of thing. And she really coached me, through my early career while I was still in the Navy. In fact, having to think through what it is that I wanted to do and why. So she was very instrumental in my life. And then there were, advocates that I've had over the years, people that I worked with that just kind of believed in me and supported me. So just a lot of folks to thank. Like I don't have like heroes. What I have are people that I can believe in that make sense to me, or people that challenge me, right? So it's not everyone that's just patting you on the back and telling you how great you are, go forth and do good things. There are also the people that say, like, hold up, wait a minute, right? There are those people in your life that also kind of, you know, interject some additional perspective taking. So, I got a couple of good friends that are really good at that, and they've been in my life a long time. Um, so yeah, like there is no figurehead. They're just people that I appreciate, things that I've come across that make sense to me that I believe in. Certainly, there are authors or pundits in this field that just kind of make sense to me. There are people that I go back to because they've started initiatives that continue to make sense to me and their principles. Like, in fact, I was just writing last night about W. Edward Deming, Dr. Deming, the father of TQM. Now, he's not a household name anymore, right? You would have to go Google him to understand what he did. But he taught a very incredible lesson called the red bead,
Hmm.
and it's a story. You can go Google it. Red bead story, W. Edward Deming. And it really talks about that things that go wrong in organizations typically aren't the fault of anybody. It's a byproduct of how the system is organized.
Hmm.
And so as I think more and more about that, the thing that ails us in organizations are there by default and not necessarily design. And we can identify those things that we've defaulted to and didn't design in to achieve better results. So that's where my head has been the last couple of weeks, and that's thanks to W. Edward Deming, right, who was the father of TQM back in the day. So you never know who actually comes around to inspire you, uh, and then makes a major difference in your life. And this is why you need to expose yourself to multiple perspectives, multiple authors, lots of different things, because those things do reside in your memory. They get triggered, and you get a brand new aha moment. So that's where I'm at now. So this week's aha moment goes to W. Edward Deming.
And the red beat. No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Well, listen, as we're wrapping up here today, Lonney, if you can, one more time, drop that social media information and where folks can find you at online.
Yeah, the company website is irizepc.com. That's IRIZE PC.com. Lonney Gregory to send me an email at lgregory@irizepc.com. You can even send me a note through Google. That's just Lonney Gregory at Gmail, right? That's hard to mess up. I'm on that Instagram thing. I think that's iRIZE I think that's my title out there. Facebook, iRIZE Performance Consulting, and LinkedIn, right? Just Lonney Gregory at LinkedIn. You can see what I'm up to.
Great. Awesome. Lonney, thank you again so much for taking time out of your day, coming on the RNG radio show, man. Definitely looking forward to having you come back.
Hey, man, I appreciate the invitation. Thanks to share, allowing me to share. And, thanks for letting me get out of bed a little earlier than I used to. I typically don't start my day before 8:30, but this was a blast. The sun is coming up sooner. It's about to get warm and pretty outside. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you so much, sir.
Absolutely, King.
Thank you for tuning in to the RNG Radio Show. Be sure to like and subscribe for more episodes and future content. If you'd like to learn more, visit us at danielumstead.com. Stay blessed, my fellow millionaires.